I went into Cieran's bedroom. It was the end of December 2005. He was in his cot, but he was shivering. When I touched him, he was burning up. So I went to get the thermometer and took his temperature, and it was 41.2 degrees. I took Cieran to the doctors at about 10:30 that morning. The doctor told me that it was just a viral infection and to keep giving Cieran Calpol and his temperature should come down. As the day progressed, Cieran really wasn't getting any better. The temperature wasn't moving. I had an appointment in the afternoon with the GP for myself, so I left Cieran with his dad and went and seen the GP. Whilst I was there for my own appointment, I mentioned Cieran and the symptoms and queried that I was worried it could be meningitis. The GP told me that there was a virus going round and to give Cieran juice and crisps. When I got home, I gave Cieran juice and he started to vomit everywhere and then became quite drowsy. I left him for a few hours, the temperature still wasn't moving, and I phoned the out-of-hours GP. I explained that Cieran was very drowsy, his temperature was still very high. They asked me had I gave him ibuprofen and I said no, because he was only so small, he was only 9 months old. They told me to give him the ibuprofen and the temperature should come down quite quickly. I gave Cieran the ibuprofen and obviously the temperature reduced quite a bit, so we went to bed. The next morning, Cieran was still asleep. I tried to wake him up. As I went to see to his twin brother Connor, I left Kieran's bottle in the cot, and when I went back into the room, Cieran had drunk the bottle in his sleep. But because I'd spoke to 3 doctors and 3 doctors had basically told me it was a viral infection, I hoped that Cieran was just sleeping off whatever he had. So I decided to leave him until the Wednesday. On the Wednesday, the same thing happened again. Cieran was hardly eating, still had his temperature. So I phoned the GP and made an appointment for that afternoon. By this point, Cieran was quite grey colour. I took him in a taxi to see the GP, who told me that she was 90% sure that Cieran was fine. I told the GP that 90% wasn't good enough for me and I wanted him to be in the hospital. She phoned the hospital while I was there and told them that the child had nothing severe. He was fine to go into a normal ward with normal children, and Mum was a little bit neurotic because she had twins. When we was at the hospital, the doctor started to tell us that they'd performed a small test on his back. I immediately questioned, was this a lumbar puncture? As I knew what that was, and I'd already asked could it be meningitis to 2 other GPs. They told me that, yeah, they had done a lumbar puncture. Later that day, the doctors told me that they didn't think Cieran had meningitis, but they didn't know what it was, and he would be on the antibiotics for a few days. The next day, when I went into Cieran's room, the doctor was there and he said, Cieran has got meningitis. There was no empathy, there was nothing. Cieran began to respond to the antibiotics that they were giving him. They did a CT scan, which they said had come back normal. Then 10 days into the treatment, Cieran had a massive seizure. It lasted for 2 hours. The second lot of diazepam caused Cieran to just stop. His whole body shut down. He had to be resuscitated and rushed to intensive care in Pendlebury Hospital. Cieran spent another week in hospital before he was finally discharged. We'd suspected that he'd lost his hearing because he just wasn't responding to any sounds on the ward. But no doctors would tell us that he had lost his hearing without performing the hearing tests, which we had to wait 6 weeks for. When we came home, Cieran, who had been a normal, healthy 9-month-old boy, came home resembling a 22-pound newborn baby. He couldn't hold his own head up. He couldn't hold his arms up. He couldn't drink a bottle. Couldn't eat solid food. It was just a smile sat on a beanbag, basically. So we got told that we was getting referred to wheelchair services. We'd be getting a hearing test. We'd be having a portage worker come round. We'd be referred to physio and occupational therapy. And at the time, we didn't know what any of these things was. We do now. But we were determined from the beginning that Cieran wouldn't be in a wheelchair. At the time, deaf didn't bother me at the time. I thought, deaf's nothing. There's millions of deaf people. But he needs to be able to walk and sit up and do things. My views have all changed since you actually realise how hard deaf is when your child can't tell you how they're feeling or what they want. He's currently getting assessed for autism and ADHD. He suffers from epilepsy. He's got cerebral atrophy, enlarged ventricles, delayed myelination in part of his brain, but they think that other parts of his brain have taken over. He's quite independent. He definitely has a personality. A fun-loving one. It's really hard with Cieran being a twin. On one hand, we're really glad as he's had a role model. He's had somebody to copy off. We've not wrapped him up in cotton wool. We've let him try to be independent. But on the other hand, we have a constant and permanent reminder of the child we had and the child we lost, as you kind of grieve for the child. Even though Cieran's still alive, the Cieran I gave birth to isn't. It's a different Cieran, if you understand that. It's hard because every milestone he meets is amazing. But then every milestone Connor meets, you realise that Cieran's probably never going to do that. Sorry. And we're trying to get respite for Cieran, but mainly for the other two kids so that they can have a break from Cieran. The good point is that we've met so many people through Cieran that we would never have met if we hadn't had a disabled child. But then we've also lost so many friends that don't have disabled children, as I think you can tend to all stick together. I don't know why, it just seems to happen. It has totally changed our life, and it's a lot harder now, but it's a lot very rewarding when you see just what he's achieved and what we've achieved as a family.